joining us for our very first episode of this Pause and Pivot collaborative podcast. We're not here to just share information and knowledge. We're here to awaken the insight and the wisdom that is found resident in the deep inner heart of our hearts. And we embrace diversity in all its forms, as those are the gems from our soul, and we're here to learn and share the beauty and the wonder of life with each other. So if this is resonating with you, if you love books, ideas, and meaningful conversations the way that we do, we're so glad that you have found us, and we welcome you all. You belong as soon as you arrive here in this space. So if this is the first time you're hearing about us, in a moment we'll introduce ourselves. So Pause and Pivot, this weekly opportunity to join together in a live conversation on Zoom, is a form of an interactive weekly podcast. So these live conversation series is going to be an opportunity for us to dive deep and explore just some big ideas from one new book every week. Woo! And if you love books like we do, oh my God, you're just going to be like a book monster, right? You're just going to be like eating books every week. So we want to, number one, encourage people to read more books, right? So just like we love cookies, we love books because of the gifts and the magic and the miracle that we can find as we experience digesting the words and the experiences and the knowledge and focusing on all of that which connects us. So we show up in this space with humility, not as experts delivering lectures or giving you information or knowledge. We show up here with all humility. And as fellow humans, we're learning here. We're reflecting. We're sharing our wisdom, and we're in this space, in the gap between what is possible in our becoming and with how we are currently showing up in our lives. So in this gap is this sort of place where we can dance, we can ask questions, we can dive deep into inquiry and have the courage to share our questions and our insights so we all learn from each other. So if you're digging that, we invite you to join us every single week live, same time on Thursdays from around the world on Zoom. And you're always welcome to join us and simply listen in. Just a moment, but so I want to say at the outset, this is the end of January of 2026. And for me in particular, this is no longer just a passion project, but a sort of sense of fulfilling a personal dharma. For me, this Pause and Pivot project, if you will, is now a year-long project. And we're going to be diving into books, as we mentioned, and big ideas that are going to span a wide range of wisdom, from ancient traditions to modern science and spirituality. Along the way, we're going to explore books on physical health and well-being, mindset and neuroplasticity, meaning and purpose, and the science and art of spiritual life. So we're also going to throw in the X factor. From time to time, we're going to welcome guest speakers, and we'll reach into additional categories like culture, consciousness, and community. And for my own personal exploration, I'll be bringing in books and speakers that help us explore the mujerista lens. This for me is such a rich and personal endeavor. And this is basically an honoring of the feminine wisdom, especially for Latinas and other women who may feel like they're in between cultures, in between jobs or roles, or even stages in life. So with that broader invitation in place, I want to welcome you again. And now let's go ahead and introduce the co-hosts so you get a chance of who the other wisdom keepers are of this amazing collaborative collection of wisdom. So again, my name is Maggie, or for those that are new to me, it's Margarita, and I'm here in San Antonio, Texas. Lived most of my life in California, and my focus as a lifestyle medicine, health, and wellness coach is to really bring back our ability to work on our mental fitness first, and we'll exploring more of those concepts along the way. So let me go ahead and pass the mic on to Archana, so she and Colin can introduce themselves. So welcome, Archana and Colin.
Thanks, Maggie. Hi, I'm Urchna. I'm joining you all, grateful to be joining you all from Southern California. And I've, been basically embarked on for most of my life, been searching for meaning. But I think when I met Maggie 4 years ago, it enlivened my search and inquiry on a whole new plane. And I'm grateful for that journey I've been on with Maggie and Colin and all of you. So, and grateful for that enrichment. Thank you again.
Thanks, Archana. And my name's Colin, and I've been I'd call myself a lifetime seeker. Only 30 plus years, but I gratefully met Maggie last year or so, and immediately there was an alignment, and her passion for changing the world, I guess, is part of what really I felt connected to. And once she started talking about books, of course, that was another thing, because books have changed my life, and especially this book, the one that we're going to talk about today. It's a book that carries a lot of meaning for me, and helped me understand meaning in ways that I hadn't before. So welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to see new friends here. So welcome.
In this space, I want to share a special note about why we are beginning this journey with this book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Okay. So basically, Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist, neurologist, and the founder of logotherapy. Okay, logotherapy is a form of psychotherapy, but it's not what you think. I'm going to dive into it later. So but real brief, logotherapy is a psychology centered not on pleasure or power, but on meaning. So when I said that we are here to be reorienting, this is what we're talking about. So everything that Viktor Frankl had to share as a survivor of a concentration camp bears more relevance and is of necessity for us to really pay attention to and to look at in the here and now. So Viktor Frankl survived multiple Nazi concentration camps, losing his family, his work, and nearly everything that could be taken from him. And yet, in that environment, in that reality, what he observed in those extreme conditions was something profoundly human. That even when almost everything is stripped away, one freedom remains: the freedom to choose our inner orientation, our attitude, and our response. So choice and inner orientation was of paramount importance to Viktor Frankl as he was striving to find ways to survive the concentration camp. So I chose this book not because it is easy or comfortable. And I know for some, this book is not an easy read, okay? I chose this book because it speaks directly to moments like this, whether you're here in America or in other countries around the world. Frankl reminds us that life is not asking us whether we will suffer. He points to the fact and the reality that suffering is part of being human. But how we will meet that suffering is key. Not when things calm down or when things become okay, but now. And this is the deeper invitation of the pause and pivot. This is where we are gathering together. We here in America are a diverse, multicultural society. We don't all share the same language, foods, traditions, or even the same ways of seeing the world or ourselves. And yet beneath those differences, there is something we do share: a desire to live with dignity, meaning, and a sense of belonging, a desire to flourish, not just individually, but together. So pause and pivot is a space for people who may be feeling stuck, uncertain, overwhelmed, or quietly searching for a way forward that doesn't rely on outrage, avoidance, despair, or even outright action. We can begin simply, we can begin quietly within our own minds and hearts. It's for people who want to reclaim their inner calm without becoming indifferent. For people who want to act from values rather than react from fear. This space is for people who sense that the work of our time begins within, reclaiming our awareness, enlivening our consciousness, and giving breath to our courage. And this begins to ripple outward into how we live, lead, and care for one another. So this year, I'm holding this Pause and Pivot project, this collective, as a kind of living project, a true collective practice. We're not here to just review information and knowledge and amazing stories in books. That is all amazing and good. We are here to move from knowledge into right action in the right time. So this is a place where we can turn inward to discover what I like to call our inner arms, our inner resources, our clarity, our steadiness, our capacity to choose meaning, even when conditions are difficult. So together, we will draw from the wisdom of books like this one and like many, many, many others. Again, we're going to draw from ancient traditions to modern research, and not as abstract theory, but as practical guidance for daily life. We'll explore how to design our days in ways that support what we call mental fitness. Just like we go to the gym and lift, weights, we don't want to go to the gym and lift styrofoam weights. We want to actually do our mental fitness with those neuroscience-backed methods that really help us. Be still. Know the courage is within us to stay with times of discomfort, and through that, with emotional resilience, building into physical well-being, mental thriving, and community spirit. And the best part that just fills my heart is that we can do this together, exploring, trying this, trying that, because we learn best in community through shared reflection, listening, and presence. And so much research in positive psychology and lifestyle medicine is now guiding us to this very clear fact that what we need now is a way to connect horizontally and vertically. So horizontally with ourselves and reaching out to others, and vertically to that which grounds us as well as that which lifts us up in our unique ways. And my friends, this is not about having all the answers. We are not here as experts. It's about asking better questions for ourselves, with others, and of our leaders. It's about standing in full awareness of reality without turning away and daring to ask, who am I capable of being now? In this moment, hour by hour, how do I want to respond? What does meaning ask of me in this moment? So if you're here because you love books, you're in the right place. We're going to go through a ton of books, one a week, right? And as we mentioned last time, about 40% of Americans have reported that they have not read one book, not even one book in 1 year. So if we can boost that number, so at least everybody in America reads one book, maybe it's one of the 50 books we're going to review this week. That will be awesome, right? So read more books, number one, right? And number two, get together, share the ideas. There's not one way. There's your unique way that we can explore. And if you're here because you're searching for grounding, direction, or hope, you're absolutely in the right place. Because myself, Archana, and Colin, we are here with our heart, and we are here for the greater good, to share our wisdom, to host this space with psychological safetiness, so everybody can show up and share with respect and dignity. We know that stories are healing, and we want to hear your story. And if you're here simply because something inside you whispered, maybe this is something I need to check out. We encourage you to begin to listen to the whispers of your soul. So let's begin, my friends, not with certainty, but with presence. Not with force, but with care, and not alone, but together. So let me pause there and let me see if anyone has a quick comment before we begin to focus on this first book.
Thank you so very much, Maggie. That was so beautifully articulated from the heart, authentically. And as we spoke last week, Colin, yourself, and I, we love to read, but it's the interactivity and that interactive inquiry that takes it on another plane. And, since we're talking about psychology, to go to, I'm just thinking of Maslow's meta motivation. That's what this is. This is meta motivation. And when it's enlivened in that inquiry is enlivened, there is unlimited potential, individually, interactively. So I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. Thank you again.
And I would say, I love that you started with this book, because the hope is that the heartfelt intention, because we all know words can be fun, but it's the felt sense of the message. And I think I know that the first time I read Frankl's book, it affected me so profoundly. It opened me up to ideas that I hadn't conceived of. And one of the biggest was that he had lost everything, the way it destroys you. And yet his mission was still to change lives. And so it's exciting to be discussing this work.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Colin. And I reached up to get my first version of the book. So if you can see, this book is all tattered and it's got tons of these things. When I read books, I don't just read them. I literally eat it, right? And a note, if you guys are going to become bookworms, if you're not already bookworms like we are, what I realized after I started rereading books, I'm like, oh, I already underlined that passage. I now get out a different color pencil, every time I read a book. And I just at the beginning of the books, what I will do is I will put this one, I don't know if I started. Yeah, this one. So the first time I read this one was August 2019, and I put it in an orange pencil. And then, so this time I read it again in other versions. And so this time I got this new one. And so now I put it January 2026, And so every time I've noticed when there is a book that I reread, we grow, we evolve, we change, we see different perspectives, and new insight becomes available to us to digest, right? Like baby food, when we're babies, you can only eat baby food. And as we evolve and we expand our ability to understand ideas and perspectives, we can then digest real food or, bananas or something. So that's what I feel about books. As we continue to evolve, hopefully in this upward spiral, we broaden and expand our ability to comprehend, and in that way can then take in and digest and integrate different pieces of what's been in this same book. Is that not amazing? Different experiences, same book.
That is amazing. And I was just thinking back to, when you said integration, right? And I was just thinking back last week when we were speaking, and I said, I was telling you that telling you all that I found some old boxes in the garage with books, and I unpacked them, brought them into the house, and integrated them into my space, into my environment. And it was like welcoming back friends. And so when it comes to Viktor Frankl, it's interesting because Maggie, you introduced me to him, and I found that it was integration on another level. And I experienced his work, and I've attempted it a couple of times. It was very heavy for me, and as I shared with you, and I was struggling. You know. But what was phenomenal was, well, what was interesting was that it was the first time I experienced a book on a noumenal level and on a phenomenal level. This was Viktor Frankl, the person. And he was in my life in a way uncomfortably. And I was struggling. And it made me face a lot of truths. And I think, Colin, you referred to that as well in some ways, you know. So it was really incredible. So thank you so very much. And it is a perfect book. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, a friendly reminder, you don't ever have to have read the books to join us. Just join in on the conversation, listen in, put in your shares in the chat. And it brings me to mind the power of books, how they impact us and the potential they have in changing the trajectory of our lives. So much of what we go in through the different stages in life is about who's around us, our environment, our coworkers, our family, our friends. And so as Archana said, books are friends. They're like family, and we bring them with us, right? Look at all the books behind me. That's a heavy load to keep bringing with me, right? And I keep getting, so if you ever come to my house, I will have an extra book of this to give to you if you want one. I will always have extras of this one and many others. So I'll share a brief story of how I was introduced to this book. I love magical, I love mysticism, and this is a true story. So my husband and I were living in Houston. Hello, Houston friends! Not too long ago. And we had a 2-story house, and we had a guest room upstairs, and I have, you know, bookshelves in every room, right? So I had a bunch upstairs in the guest room, and I would go up there once a week to, you know, just dust off, clean the bathroom and stuff like that. And so one time I was in a rush and I opened the door really quick. So with that draft that was caused by opening the door, a book that was in that bookshelf fell off that bookshelf. Can anyone guess what book that was? This one. I bought this in a used bookstore when we were traveling through Arizona or something. And I was like, I just put it on the shelf. Years went by, and then I picked it up and I'm like, oh, I've been meaning to read you. And this is what happened, my friends. I opened this up. 2 days later, I finished it. And then I said, this for me was truth. This for me was where I was wanting to learn more. And I had just opened up my yoga studio in Houston. And I was like, I need to learn this because this for me is yoga in action. It is union of mind and body. It is the sense of self-concept and awareness. It is a sense of self, not mastery yet, but ability to self-regulate, to step into and own our choices as we move into self-mastery. So the very next week, I looked up online, the very next week, there was the World Congress of Logotherapy taking place in Chicago. So I signed up. I wasn't a counselor. I wasn't a psychologist. I wasn't a psychiatrist. You know, I was a professional executive who just opened up a yoga studio. And yet this was my next pebble, my next little stepping stone that my soul was whispering to me. So the power of books holds the potential of our possibilities. And the beauty of what we're doing each week is to just say, how does this book land with me? How do these ideas resonate with me, where I'm at in this life cycle of life, with the duties and responsibilities that are in my life, and with the dreams and vision that I am aspiring to for my future, that I am now an active participant in co-creating. So let's go ahead and begin. I know we're way behind time, but we are here in the spirit of just sharing, so thank you. So this month, so this week and in February, we'd love to invite you to join us as we focus in on the core ideas and themes around meaning, love, and the foundations of flourishing. So today we'll be focusing on Man's Search for Meaning, and next month the books will be Love 2.0, then on the 12th, Molecules of Emotion, then on the 19th, Why We Sleep, and on the 26th, the 5 Love Languages. So each week, a different view around this theme today. So Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist and neurologist. He was the founder of logotherapy, which is often referred to as the third Viennese school of psychotherapy. Okay, he followed Freud. Everybody's probably heard of Freud and his psychoanalysis, and then Adler, who introduced what's called individual psychology. While Freud emphasized the will to pleasure, right, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, Adler, in a very general way, emphasized the will to power. In Frankl's work, he proposed something different. He proposed that the primary human drive is actually what he calls the will to meaning. So this is the new foundation, the new perspective, the new orientation that he will be looking at in this book. And Frankl developed these ideas, not in a quiet academic office, but through lived experience. He survived multiple Nazi concentration camps during the Holocaust, including Auschwitz. In those camps, he lost his parents, his brother, his wife, and the manuscript of the book he had been writing. It was called The Doctor and His Soul. I have it up there if you guys want to read that too. And yet, even in those extreme conditions, he observed something extraordinary. That while almost everything can be taken from a person, everything, even everything, one inner freedom remained, the freedom to choose one's attitude and response. So that is the calling message from Viktor Frankl. So Man's Search for Meaning is both a memoir and a psychological framework. So it's basically in two parts, and this edition has additional postscripts and things like that. So this original one will have just two parts. The first part of the book reflects like everyday life in the camps, but it's not a horrific rendition. The perspective is basically from the ordinary prisoner, what a daily life is kind of for a prisoner, in a very gentle way. And these are everyday human beings. The second part introduces logotherapy in a nutshell. So it outlined Viktor Frankl's meaning-centered approach to mental health, resilience, and human dignity. And I share this context not to dramatize suffering, not to ground us in why these ideas carry, but to ground us in why these ideas carry much weight, okay? These ideas are forged in real life, under real pressure. And that's part of why they continue to resonate so strongly today. This book is not just influential, it was pivotal for me. It's the reason I spent those 4 years studying logotherapy and why I learned the yoga, all the different yoga philosophies, right? The Shad Darshan, and why I looked at Advaita Vedanta and why I was able to connect some of the ideas with logotherapy and yoga philosophy, meaning how we live in the union of our mind and our body as we go about pursuing our duty, or in yoga called dharma. So this book, the meanings in this book, sits at the center of my work and my philosophy and approach to life. I chose it to open these conversations because it sets the orientation for everything that follows. Frankl doesn't ask us to look backward or to fix ourselves. He asks us to look forward, to focus on and orient towards a meaningful future, a reason, a why, even and especially when life is difficult. It sometimes calls, I will call this the flourishing forward. So again, Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist and a neurologist, and he survived a Holocaust survivor. After he was released, it took him 9 days to write this book. So it is from the heart, it is from a lived experience, and for some, it is considered one of the top 100 books to read in your life. So this is basically about a psychology of meaning. This is not a book focused on the horrors of the camps for shock value. Frankl really wanted to explore how everyday life in such conditions was reflected in the inner life of ordinary people going through very challenging times, and what made it possible for some to survive with dignity intact. So that is a real brief summary of Viktor Frankl, his work, which is like in 20 different books, all of which are in German. So many of them are still in German, so I can't read them. So we're going to now go over 4 big ideas. So let's go ahead. Big idea number 1. So the idea is meaning is situational, personal, and always asking something of us. So one of the real subtleties of Frankl's work is that he distinguishes between sort of the small m meaning and the large capital meaning, like what's the purpose of life? Okay, so right away he says that's not where we're focusing. That's for our clergy, our priests and such, to really talk about the spiritual aspect of the bigger question of, meaning. But he focuses on, again, the everyday prisoner or the everyday person that is suffering, the everyday person. So this is one of the most radical ideas, that meaning is not something we invent in the abstract. It is something we discover moment by moment, at times hour by hour. And we do that by being present, curious, and with an attitude or an orientation to respond to life as it actually is, not resisting it or wishing it were otherwise. So Viktor Frankl really is a true realist and focuses on the power of action, choice and action. So he tells us that we need to stop asking, what is the meaning of life? And to spend our time in thought or meditation. While those are good, he says we also need to recognize that there is something that life is asking of us. Are we listening? Are we paying attention? Do we have the courage to stand up for our values and the kind of life that we wish to be in, the kind of life that we wish to leave for our children and our societies? So he says that meaning is something very concrete. And the most beautiful thing is that it's specific to each individual, honoring the uniqueness with which each of us meets life, with which each of us presents our own uniqueness, talents, gifts, what we are here to share with the world. We are each a note, and life is a symphony. So the more we can bring those together, we can really all treasure and relish the beautiful sounds. So each situation, each season in our life, each challenge of the day or the moment, these are all invitations. So we choose these as invitations instead of trying to numb ourselves or distract ourselves or to just look away. So each of these challenges now, if we are willing, poses a unique question. And we answer not with words, but how we live. So his quote, life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answers to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. So that's the big idea number 1. Meaning is personal. There is no single right answer that applies to everyone. There is only your answer to this moment and your challenge. So, curious, I'll pause there, see if there are any insights, ahas. You can write them down in your worksheet, post it in the chat. So what question does life seem to be asking of you right now?
For myself, this idea didn't come through right then, but his discussion of meaning set me on a journey, and it's strangely only in the last years that I feel like I'm starting to recognize that what he was pointing at is that we each make our own meaning. In his book, he talks about the different people and how one person could be experiencing the same exact thing, and they would be completely devastated and floored and waste away almost immediately, and then another would thrive and serve, and that's the thing that I came today just so excited about, because we get to make our own meaning, and that feels scary when you really think about it, because it comes with a lot of responsibility. But anyway, that's really the thing that that quote that you just said, it just really hits home.
Oh, bonus framework, meaning-centered orientation. So, like I said, we're going to expand here because you have me, and I can tell you a little bit more, give you a little bit more glimpse into how Viktor Frankl looks at different pathways to exploring meaning. That we just said that it's personal and that's for everyone, for every moment. So he invites us to shift our orientation. So much of our attention is spent asking, what's wrong? Why is this happening? What are the problems? And if we look at neuroscience, we understand that's how the brain works. The brain is here to help us stay alive. So it's on alert all the time for what's wrong, what's missing. So it really takes more of a conscious effort and an intentional focus to bring about what Frankl is asking us to look at, which is this meaning-centered orientation. Instead of looking at the problem bucket, let's look at what's the possibility or what's the meaning bucket. So that takes that pause and that pivot. So he asks us to say, given what is happening, what is being asked of me now? So this doesn't deny what's happening. This doesn't deny the suffering in ourselves or in others. It simply refuses to keep our attention only on the problem or only on the suffering, but to widen the lens and to bring more focus on the meaning. And he shares a beautiful, beautiful formula. So if you're feeling a sense of despair, sort of that downness in spirit, the formula is D equals S minus M. So if someone wants to type that in the chat, D equals S minus M. Despair equals suffering minus meaning. So despair is what we experience when all we look at is the suffering. If we hyperinflate and focus on the meaning and bring more attention to meaning, we can actually zero out the suffering and the despair as we connect with that sense of meaning. So really look at that idea and where do we put more of our focus, on the suffering or the meaning? And how does that relate to our experience of times of when we're feeling despair or depression or helplessness? And a pathway he brings us is this idea of a meaning triangle. So go ahead and create a triangle. And on one of those triangles, we can put work or creativity. So the top, you can put work or creativity. And he says, this is a pathway where we can all give to life through our actions, through our work, our service. So this is creative meaning, right? We can all show up and give creatively through our work, whether it's a job, whether it's creating families, whether it's art and cart, everything like that, that is creative. Another one is sort of this experiential meaning. So on another corner, you can put love or experience. So what we receive from life through these experiences, it could be through meeting someone and through the experience of love, or through having experiences of things like beauty and awe and connection. So that's the experiential meaning. And the third one, which is really his genius, is this idea that attitudinal meaning. So you could put attitude in that third little corner, right? So there's work, love, and then attitude. And this is our choice. It's the stance we take toward unavoidable suffering. So when meaning may feel absent in all three is when we may be experiencing these ideas of sort of despair. So just ask yourself, am I in that sort of despair triangle? Then pause, pivot, and say, where can I focus on discovering? Not inventing or making up, it's discovering the meaning. For it is there if we look for it. So this meaning-centered life gently reverses that despair triangle by not fixing everything, but by restoring our pathways of connection and expression through creativity and work, through connection and love and experiences, and through choice that brings about that attitudinal orientation. That was kind of a bonus section I just threw in because I realized that not all of these concepts are in this book, but they bring to light so much of what Viktor Frankl is trying to share. So part one, again, is sort of his view of the experience of the prisoners in the camps. And part two is, again, that sort of very brief synopsis of what logotherapy is. Everybody. All right, big idea number two. Freedom finds its shape through responsibility. Oh my gosh, I love this. I love this idea so much. And right now is a time where we really can focus on this and see if we can do something about this. So Frankl is famous for saying that everything can be taken from a person except one thing, the freedom to choose one's attitude. So we just showed one way that we can even work within that meaning triangle, right? He was also clear that freedom is not the final word. Here in America, we put freedom above all. We value it to such a degree that we have built that Statue of Liberty on the East Coast. That statue which says that we are here with all rights to pursue our freedom, freedom to pursue happiness. But Frankl says that freedom without responsibility can turn into arbitrariness. Responsibility is what gives freedom dignity and direction. We always talk about here that freedom isn't free, but we don't even talk about, well, what else can we do? What else on top of freedom can we stand for? Can we live through and by? Well, Frankl, through his studies with his students in Europe and here in the States, studied the deep need for people to connect with meaning. And so he suggested that here in America, the Statue of Liberty should be balanced by a statue of responsibility. Can you imagine that? A new statue on the West Coast. We don't know what state it would be in. Let's not get into that battle. But a Statue of Liberty on the East Coast and a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. Can you feel how that will bring this greater sense of balance and a way in which each of us can actually be more participatory in this great nation and representative government of ours? Not just freedom, but responsibility. So Viktor Frankl says, freedom is only part of the story and half the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomena, whose positive aspect is responsibleness. So responsibility here is not about obligation or guilt. It's about authorship. Being a part, co-writing the story of how we nation build, how we build communities, and how we build our families. Recognizing that our choices are shaping who we are becoming. So who's envisioning that new statue on the West Coast? Or maybe in our home or even in our own town? So question, where in your life are you being invited to respond to with greater intention and a sense of responsibility? So again, write down in your sheet, post in the chat, or if you'd love to share.
I feel like I'm being invited to be responsible for living in the moment, not the future, because I tend to be future, but I need to be present for myself, for my daughter, for my parents, and stop being in the future. And I need to be responsible for that because I keep saying I'm gonna do it and then I'm not doing it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so big idea number 3 is this idea of meaningful tension. Meaningful tension is essential for mental health. And let's be honest, whenever we talk about mental health, the sort of the stigma, right? There's something wrong with me or, whatever. Frankl challenges the idea that well-being means eliminating tension. or having these doubts and questions about our existence and our purpose. He introduces a term called nuo-dynamics, and that's N-O-O, nuo-dynamics, which is an idea that the healthy tension between who we are and who we are being called to become. Can you feel that tension? Almost like that rubber band, right? When it's not active, when we're not present, when we're not really aware of this potentiality, we're just kind of like a rubber band not being used. But as soon as we're engaged, seeking to move towards our, bigger version of ourselves, our next version of ourselves, that actually requires tension because we're pulling towards that next version of ourselves. And he says, this is not a bad thing. And in our era, there is a real hesitancy to talk about this. So I feel it's a great time to normalize these discussions, to say, hey, I'm having questions, I'm having doubts, I'm wondering what my life is all about, I'm wondering what's my purpose, because we're here in our culture where we have so many signs and signals that say, don't talk about those things. And believe me, as a Latina, we don't talk about those things. We keep those things in. And we show the masks that, keep us in our workplaces and in those environments. So we don't show those doubts and what are perceived weaknesses. So in these spaces, we're going to normalize that in our quest to discover different areas and pathways towards meaning, we're going to be asking questions, which means we don't have all the answers. So Frankl says, what man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal. So this helps explain the boredom or emptiness many feel, even when life looks fine on the outside. Meaningful tension is not the same as chronic stress. It is actually a purposeful stretch. And that to me right there is golden for our times. We may all think that we're in chronic stress, but perhaps we aren't actually challenging ourselves in the right direction, the right orientation. And take it from me, as a former yoga studio owner and teacher, we live with the idea of like, no, I want peace and I want contentment and I want that stillness. Yes, and when we are in times of challenge, in times of, collapsing our societies or our own ways in which we are understanding how we're showing up in our own nation or communities, in these times of uncertainty where we're asking more questions than we have solutions, this is when we are called to be stretched. So how can we look at this in a positive frame, a meaning-oriented framework, where meaningful tension is a sort of purposeful stretch, a new kind of yoga stretch. So where might a meaningful stretch be calling you forward right now?
I think it's in line with the original messaging, but what you've outlined in this point number 3 for me is only recently coming to light in my own experience, because for the longest time my whole scene was trying to get peaceful, trying to meditate my way into peace. And it's only been in the recent past that I've started to recognize that real peace is being able to be in that tension, but have created the state within oneself to hold the tension. And in spiritual esotericism, there's this phrase called tension of the opposites. And I think that's what he's pointing at here, is being able to stand in the middle of that space where, like, you are one of our guests mentioned, I don't know your name, but anyway, you talked about being there for your parents, your daughter, your work, all this stuff. There was a time that I thought true peace meant I didn't have to deal with that. But what I've started to realize now, I'm a father. My wife and I are parents of 2 cognitively disabled sons, one 40, one 35, and they're a full-time job. And for me, peace was not having to deal with them. But I'm starting to recognize that true peace is being able to stand in the middle of that tension and look around and say, I'm okay. I'm okay. And I think about Frankl standing in the middle of a concentration camp. And I remember reading about him picking the bugs out of his dang soup and giving thanks for it. And I'm thinking, man, this guy was smoking something.
I know, right? That's the treasure of the book, is to say the ordinary day in a horrible situation, we're still humans. How are we still human in even extraordinarily troubling times? So thank you for sharing that, Colin. And when you said tension of the opposites, we will at some point be covering this other book called The Power of Full Engagement. And that does talk about all of that. And there's another book called The Power of Opposite Strengths as well. Okay. Awesome. All right. So big idea number 4, suffering is not meaningful, but our attitude toward it can be. So suffering is not necessarily meaningful. Frankl is very clear. Suffering itself is not meaningful, and avoidable suffering should be avoided at all costs. Otherwise, it's masochism, right? But when suffering is unavoidable, we are still invited to choose how we meet it. So that's the key. If suffering comes into our life, if it's avoidable, then let's do our share to get out of it. If it's unavoidable, then he shares this quote: when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So meaning does not erase suffering, but it can transform the experience we have of how suffering is processed through our mind and our body, how suffering is digested through our being, how suffering can be transcended by connecting the meaning of our suffering with dignity, courage, and humanity ourselves. So when we're no longer able to avoid or change a situation, how do we stand in that awareness that we now have an opportunity and a challenge to change ourselves? And what would we be changing towards? What do we want? Given that this is happening, what is it that we are wanting to create? So how does that land for you guys?
I was going to share that, for me, it's, I think of suffering invisibly. Most of us are suffering invisibly. And I think what, Viktor Frankl is asking is that calling for meaning and mirroring in some ways what's happening visibly. And it's okay. And in a meaningful way. And finding courage to do that. And so while the optics may be a person is suffering, let's say in a circumstance that's, let's say grief, for instance, and it may evoke pity, right? And the person may be choosing to embody courage, they find courage, and they're visibly choosing to live through this grief in a meaningful way, whatever that may be, right? And I think that's where, for me, then they're mirroring choice. And perhaps maybe role modeling, how does one go through grief? How does one go through depression? And again, individually, how does one do it? But not invisibly, but choosing to be visible about it and choosing to be vulnerable. So that's kind of how it's taking shape in my mind and in my heart. Thank you.
So as we begin to wrap up our big ideas, just a reminder of the formula: despair, or D equals S minus M. So when suffering is present and meaning feels absent, of course, all we will see is that suffering, and despair will grow. That is one of the brilliant and unique perspectives that Viktor Frankl shared with us. And when even a small amount of the sense of meaning is introduced, when our perspective and the shift of our focus moves towards seeing more, looking for the good, looking and discovering the meaning, again, the specific meaning, the unique meaning that only we can see in our unique life, then despair begins to loosen. And this is not about forcing positivity or just looking on the bright side for the sake of finding that sunny perspective. It's truly about remembering that meaning can be a stabilizing force, a grounding force, a strengthening force, connecting us again deeper in so we can branch out and connect with others, and we can rise up to connect with those values, those virtues, that which propels us forward in pathways for our own growth and evolution. So wherever it is that you are, that you're finding yourself in your personal life, in your community, in your orientation as a leader in your community or in the nation, as circumstances do not change, Viktor Frankl's challenge is, how will we then choose to change ourselves? And this is where the serenity prayer comes in, and we acknowledge that there are those aspects that we cannot change, but can we please pray and ask for that wisdom to know the difference and the courage to take action in the right direction for ourselves. So meaning does not require perfection. It asks only for presence, honesty, and that responsibility-ness. So we want to thank you as we're wrapping up for being here, for listening, for engaging with these ideas. And again, not as theory, but as curious anthropologists in our own lives, as we're looking to identify those golden nuggets of wisdom that apply to us in our lives today in this moment, and to begin to have that curiosity and that courage to grab those little nuggets of wisdom that are important and relevant to our lives, and to open up to the moment by moment, hour by hour question of how we can live these ideas, put them into practice, look them over, collect the data on what works well for us, and then share it with others. So how can we move from just looking at the problems, sitting in our despair, and opening up to discover greater meaning in our lives, and to have the courage together in community and as victorious, courageous, full human beings to live the questions. So thank you, my friends. That wraps up my summary of the book. I'll go ahead and open it up to the co-hosts now for their final comments, and then we'll open it up to any questions.
I'll go ahead. Thank you, Maggie. Thanks for this time today. I appreciate the timely reminders as well as depth that I hadn't embodied, I guess. I would just say that it's the timeliness of the messages. There's so much suffering. There's so much suffering in the world. This book helped me. In my own journey, I made a decision that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And I started to realize that when I judged suffering, when I felt like it was like, this is wrong, as soon as I said this is wrong, that's when it became misery that was inescapable. And so, yeah, that's for me. And just on an aside, I really apologize, but I got a family thing happening right now. So I'm going to sign off. But either way, I'm so grateful to see new friends. Would welcome you next week and invite you. And I'm sorry I can't do the download with you, but I'll be here again. Well, we'll talk tomorrow. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you, Colin.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you for your presence.
Thank you.
Bye.
I mean, there's just so much to say, but it is a calling. I see it as a calling, and thank you for, an inquiry. Definitely courage to have to go deeper and look, for meaning in places that I'm not comfortable with, to have the courage to stretch that band, as you said, and maybe go to another and stretch it a little bit further out. So for me, I think that's where it is timely, as Colin said, and I think it is time, and and to swim in that gap of not knowing, and knowing that there is something. And then it's also in some ways for me, pretty much a principled way of living in terms of, for myself, I've always wanted to befriend failure. I've always wanted to be friends with failure, befriend it. And I personally think, and I tell my kids this, the earlier we befriend failure, the better it is. And I think in some ways, I'm not looking to befriend suffering, but I am looking for, for possibly seeing the potential of meaningfulness and discovering myself, a whole new self through that, and showing up as my hero, right? My own hero, not looking externally, but internally, that heroic, right, call. So thank you so much.
Love it so much. Thank you all, as always, Ertana. And yes, so the Man's Search for Meaning, again, it may not be an easy read, but again, it's something that at some point in one's life would be beneficial to read. And so we want to invite you to join us every week, again, to look at 4 big ideas from a new book every week. For the month of February, the lineup is we're going to look at Love 2.0, and then Molecules of Emotion, looking at the science of how mind and body are actually connected. Then we'll look at Why We Sleep, the importance of the ultimate goal of rest so that we can show up as our best. And then the 5 love languages to wrap up February, looking at, how we connect with others in relationships and in ourselves as well. So every week, join us live if you like, and then we'll be starting to release the podcasts as well. Who knows where they'll be? Spotify, Apple, we'll announce those invitations. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we hope that this will be a container for you to dive in, listen to some ideas, and take away what worked for you. So if you have your worksheet from today, you can work at the last 2 sections and look at those questions, like what landed for you, what were some of your big takeaways from today, the big ideas, what really landed, one big idea that landed for you that you are encouraged and passionate to maybe take a small action on today or this week, a small, tiny action forward, or something that you recognize that may no longer serve you, that you want to stop. So like kryptonite, there are these little rocks or dust that is covering us, that is taking away our energy and our focus. Removing one of those might be the first step that we take. And then again, at the end, we always encourage you, how did this book rate for you? 1 to 5, was it a superstar for you? Was it a 1? It's not really for you. And if you have a connection with this book, what's your next step? Do you want to buy the book? Do you want to get it at your local library? Or are you one that likes to maybe listen to it on, an audio or some Audible format? Or maybe it's just not for you. So check the box on that with your sheet. And then also, is this going to be your next book that you read? So we're tracking how many books we're reading this year. So the last corner in that worksheet is how many books have you read this year? So go ahead and put in that as your starting baseline, how many you've read up until today, January 29th. And then every week you can start to add in, how many books did you read, And we don't expect ever that you're going to read every single book every week. That's my job. I'm here to dive in and read every single book, and I can't wait how I am now organizing my time to read books so we can then share these ideas with you. We invite you to connect with us online and follow us, Pause and Pivot Podcast. We'll share that link in our newsletter. To receive our newsletter so you get the invitations for these live Zooms and the links to the podcasts, please do just reach out to me, DM me.